About 120 pregnant women were supposed to be enrolled in a study in early September. They were enrolled for 7 months, followed up for 7 months was the plan. We still have yet to see any announcement of what the results of those studies were. And I think it's shocking, frankly, that we're asking pregnant women to get influenza vaccine, and we don't have a scientific basis, that we haven't done the kinds of study that needs to be done to find out if that's a safe policy for pregnant women and for their unborn babies who are developing in the womb. It's about the science. How much science do we have? How good is it when it comes to giving every single person in this country an influenza shot every year, including pregnant women? I think the data is very thin.
At best. I couldn't agree with you more. The question I had, though, and we haven't discussed this previously, but we did mention earlier that 90 million doses of H1N1 swine flu were administered to the public last year. Do you happen to have the stats on how many doses of regular seasonal flu were administered? And maybe this is the...
I don't, except for I know that we have consistently in this country about a 30 to 35% uptake with influenza vaccine. It's very low, really.
So not much more than the swine flu? About the same?
No.
Okay.
And here's my concern with these 71 million doses of unused H1N1 vaccine and the unused seasonal influenza vaccine. Most of those vaccines contain thimerosal, the mercury preservative thimerosal, because most of them are in multi-dose vials. There's only a very small amount of single-dose vial vaccine that's mercury-free or trace mercury. So here we have a lot of unused doses of influenza vaccine every year, the majority of which has thimerosal in it. You know that thimerosal-containing vaccines, including thimerosal-containing influenza vaccine, cannot be thrown in a regular garbage can, cannot be poured down the sink, because it's considered hazardous material. You cannot dispose of mercury-containing products in the normal garbage or pour it down the drain.
But you can.
That's pretty shocking. But you can't put it into people.
An innocent child or an infant you can inject it into, but you can't throw it in the garbage.
Nope.
So it's an interesting observation as to what actually a disparity as to the reality of what's going on here. And now there's 70 million doses of the H1N1 that were not used last year. Do you know if these are being disposed of properly, of course, or are they actually going to take this vaccine and incorporate it and combine it with the seasonal flu vaccine?
Well, it depends upon when that H1N1 vaccine was made last year. There is a shelf life to vaccine, which is why you have to dispose of it after the expiration date. It's my understanding that a number of these doses expire in June of 2010. So I don't know how many, and I don't know, how they rolled out the production of this H1N1 vaccine. Maybe some of it could be used in the trivalent formula for this season. I don't know the answer to that.
All right. Well, it would be interesting if you could have a chance to review that and find out. Maybe we can report that as to what's going on with it, because my concern is that they're going to try to just to get rid of it in the new vaccines. Although in some cases it really doesn't matter, because the incentive for doing so would be to make sure they didn't waste it. But if in fact the government already purchased this, which I think they purchased the bulk of the vaccines, and it's not laying in inventory in the drug company's warehouse, then there's no incentive for them to do that. It's just an incentive actually for the opposite, to make new vaccines so they could have more sales.
Well, I think that we really do need to take a hard look at this cradle-to-the-grave approach for influenza vaccine. And we have to certainly demand that the proper scientific studies be done. For those people who want to use influenza vaccine, they deserve no less. And we certainly shouldn't be in the business of mandating the use of influenza vaccine in this country. It seems like every single time the CDC recommends a vaccine for universal use by children and now by adults, there's this issue of whether or not it should be required. And I'm very concerned about that, because we should all have the right to make free choices about the kind of health care we want, the kind of products that we want to use, and that should go for vaccines as well.
Well, can you let our listeners know what the current status of the flu vaccine is? You mentioned earlier that it's recommended for everyone from 6 months to time of death, but has that recommendation been converted to a mandatory policy for school-aged children? In other words, if they don't have their annual swine or flu vaccine, they will not be admitted to class?
I know that several states in the last few years have either tried to make it mandatory or have. I confess I haven't done a recent review of the states that have added it to requirements. I'll do that. But I know that parents in different states are trying to urge their legislators not to require the influenza vaccine for school entry. As you know, in the last 25 years, there has been this incredible push to get these vaccines mandated. I remember in 2007, within 6 months of licensure in 2006 of the Gardasil vaccine, the HPV vaccine, the company went in and aggressively lobbied the legislatures to require it for all sixth grade girls. So this is the trend, both for the companies who are producing these vaccines and want to have a stable market that they can predict because the mandates are enforced, to the public health officials who see every single microorganism that they could potentially eradicate with the use of vaccines. They're very philosophically very much in favor of these laws. And the people, in the meantime, the people are losing their right to make these choices. Every time a new vaccine is required by law, we lose a little bit of our freedom to make choices about the kinds of products that we're forced to use. Products like vaccines that contain, additives like mercury, aluminum, and that can cause brain damage, that can cause death. Every vaccine has an inherent risk of injury or death. And if you happen to have genetics or biological high-risk factors that put you at greater risk than others for suffering vaccine-induced harm, you're out of luck if you're required to do that. Because basically what the state's saying to you is, you either put your life on the line or your child's life on the line for these vaccines, or you can't have an education. It goes all the way up through college now, these requirements. You can't get educated because you haven't had this vaccine that could potentially hurt you, and the societal punishments that are going to be attached could be much greater in the future, including not being able to hold a job, not being able to get a driver's license, not being able to get on a plane, not being able to get into a hospital or a nursing home because you can't show proof that you've been vaccinated every year with influenza vaccine. There's something wrong with that picture.